Quran was revealed in 23 years. So it was not revealed as one book. It was revealed different verses, different chapters, etc. Now, whenever a verse was revealed, Prophet ﷺ had groups of companions that are called writers of revelation. Now, we have their names. We know who these people are, like Zayd ibn Thabit, Uthman ibn Affan, Ali ibn Abi Talib. We have their names. We know who they are. We know their biographies, etc. Now, these people, the Prophet would call them and will tell them, command them to write the verses of the revelation. Okay? So that was the life of the Prophet. Meaning the Quran was written, all of it, in the life of the Prophet, in his presence and by his command. Okay? Not only that, the Prophet and the people, they memorized the verses of the Quran after the revelation. So today you have millions of people who memorize the Quran, letter by letter, all of it, from beginning to end. And all of these people have what we call ijazah, which is a certificate of their memorization, which has the names of their teachers, the teachers of their teachers, all the way back to the Prophet. So the source of where they took the Quran from. And you can only take the ijazah after you've been tested in the Quran as a memorizer. So they will ask you and you'll have to say off by heart, you have to recite the Quran. If you don't do that, you don't get that certificate. And this is the case with all of these people in the chain of narration. Now you have millions of people with these certificates today, alive today, that we observe. Now this tradition was there from the life of the Prophet. So writing is something we don't even really care about as Muslims because of that oral tradition that exists. Nobody can change the Quran because they are memorizers of the Quran. So now you have people memorizing the Quran already. You have the Quran written down. Now at the end of the life of the Prophet ﷺ, Angel Gabriel comes to the Prophet ﷺ, and he revises the Quran with him twice and tells him where to place the verses. Now the Quran is complete. This is the chapters, these are the verses, etc. So he usually came to him once a year, and the last time he came 2 times to do the revision and put the verses in the places, etc. Now, the Prophet ﷺ, before his death, now we have the Quran, we have the order of the verses, we have full of it memorized by the companions and by the Prophet, and we have it written down. But it's written down on parchment, because at that time, people had bones, they had rocks, they had whatever they could write on, they would write the Quran on, and it's individually written, because it was not revealed as one book. So the Prophet passes away, and then you have the first caliphate, which is Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, which is only ruled for 3 years, and he passed away. He didn't live for that long. So at the time of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, what happened is we had a battle that took place. Okay, it's called the Battle of Yamama. And in this battle where Muslims fought, as we said, there was many memorizers of the Quran already existed. So a lot of memorizers died in that battle. So they were fighting and they died. So Umar ibn Khattab, which is the second caliphate, came to Abu Bakr while he was the leader. He came to the first caliphate. And he said that many people have died. And I fear that the Quran may be lost, meaning if everyone dies or something, then the Quran will be lost. Bear in mind, Abu Bakr memorizes the full Quran. Umar himself, the one who's coming and speaking, he memorizes the full Quran. But he's saying, I'm afraid if Muslims die, the Quran will be lost. So why don't we collect it? It's present already written. So he makes this suggestion to collect the Quran. Then they bring Zayd ibn Thabit, which is a companion of the Prophet. What does he do? He collects all of these parchments of the Quran that we said that were written. And do you know what they do? For every verse, and now bear in mind, we're talking about barely 1 year after the Prophet's death or 2 years. We're not talking about like years and years and years. We're talking about just after the Prophet passes away. Then Zayd ibn Thabit, what he does is this. With his committee, every single person that brings one verse of the Quran, they already memorize the Quran, so they know what is the Quran. But they still apply this criteria. They say every single person who will bring a written verse, he needs to have 2 witnesses that saw him taking that verse from the Prophet. Why are they doing that? To ensure that nobody comes later and say, oh, this is that. Not because they already have the Quran, but they went to that extent to make sure not leave any room of doubt.
Okay.
So for every single verse, they brought 2 witnesses, testifying that, okay, we saw this person take this verse from the Prophet. Now they have the Quran collected. Now the Quran is there. Now you have the time of the second caliphate, which is Umar ibn Khattab. And then you have the time of Uthman ibn Affan, which is what you're talking about, the third caliphate. Now the Quran is already there. Collected is in the house of Hafsa, now the daughter of Umar, is there. There's no issues with it. It exists. Now, what Uthman ibn Affan did is he made standard copies and sent, because now Islam widespread everywhere, right? You know, I'm sure you heard probably about Islam's expansion later, right? You had all the way from China to Spain, like you had this huge empire. So because Islam's widespread so much, what Uthman ibn Affan did is he made these book form copies of the Quran, and he sent to different regions of the Muslims. Like he sent to Levant, he sent to Iraq, he sent to different places. And then so people can, this is the source now. And whatever these copies that he made, he brought Zayd ibn Thabit, remember that name, the same person who collected the time of Abu Bakr. He brought him to oversee these copies that are made. And then he sent these copies to different regions so Muslims can have a copy they can rely on. It's a copy of the original which they can rely on. And the original from Hafsa remained still there. That was written at the time of the Prophet. That stayed all the way until 50 or 60 AH, 20, 30 years after Uthman. And bear in mind, there was already millions of memorizers of the Quran. Nobody was concerned about the text anyways, the written text, because everyone was there. Anyone would go to the mosque, and there are people who teach the Quran, and then people who learn the Quran. And there's the concept that I told you about ijazah, give them permission that now you can teach the Quran as well. This tradition was always there, so nobody needed to rely on the writing anyways. So that is a kind of overview like of history, right? From beginning to end, so just we don't miss any points. Yeah. So
no, that was actually phenomenal.
Yeah, and that Uthmanic Mus'haf is what we have copies of today. So all the copies that we have from the 1st century onwards, like the Sana'a manuscripts, which are 15,000 parchments, date back to 950 Qur'ans from the 1st century onwards. A top copy, which is from the late 1st century. All of these manuscripts that we have are the same Uthmanic text, and they have the same Quran that we have today. The Birmingham parchment, the small parchment that we have in the Museum of Birmingham, which has from chapter 2 of the Quran, is carbon dated to the life of the Prophet himself. And it has the same Quran that we're leading today. So Muslims have no issues when it comes to whether it is written or oral preservation of the Quran. But we don't rely on the written as a primary source anyways.
Okay. Oh, that's phenomenal explanation then. Because I got really confused there. So that really adds a lot of kind of context to it.